On this episode of Clear the Air,
People hire business coaches.
Right.
People hire a personal trainer. Why? Because the personal trainer will help them reach their goals more efficiently. They don't have to go through as much of the trial by error. So if you get finished with the race and there was no issues and it felt like the stars completely aligned, it's kind of like, oh, I'm in the twilight zone. This is not normal.
Right.
You know, it's really weird. Once you figure out that really there's no limit, it's just a solution. There's solutions. Like, if I can remedy all the different solutions to challenges that I face, your potential becomes limitless. What are we capable of?
All right, welcome to Clear the Air podcast. Usually with Nate Jones. Nate Jones is out today, this week, and so I'm filling in for him. I'm Shad Slaughter, and I'm very excited to have a guest today, Mr. Ben Light.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, way excited for this conversation. Ben and I met 6 or 7 years ago at a Ragnar event in Wisconsin. And Ragnar events, it was a trail running Ragnar event. They have teams and they go out and they run the loops. And the whole team has to complete the loops. It's usually a 2-day event or something like that?
Yeah, like 24 hour.
Yeah. And I was there with our brand Spry, and I think, Ben, you were there with KT Tape?
Yeah, one of my sponsors at the time was KT Tape.
Yeah.
And so I was representing them in their booth right next door to you.
Yeah. Do you remember there was one thing that happened in the show area, in the booth right next to yours? Do you remember what it was?
Something happened?
Yeah.
Like
it burned up.
Oh, I didn't see that.
You didn't see? Oh, maybe you were out on a run.
No.
Yeah, like the guys next to you were making something.
Oh.
And so they had like a propane grill.
Oh,
and
I do remember
and their
that.
propane caught fire, and it was like shooting a torch, and their whole tent went up, and your guy, the KT tent, was like miraculously saved from going up in flames. So
Must be the tape. I don't know.
anyway, so yeah, it must be the tape. So it was a lot of fun at that event, getting to know Ben. My son was actually out there with us. He was 9, and he was just fascinated with some of the feats that Ben's able to do. So that's what we want to talk a little bit about. But Ben, why don't you give a little introduction of yourself? And
Sure. So my name is Ben Light. On Instagram, I guess where a lot of people follow and find me, is called Adventure Your Potential. And Adventure Your Potential is my company name, basically. I believe our life is the ultimate adventure, and we're all striving to reach a greater potential. And so that's where I came up with the name Adventure Your Potential. And I am an endurance athlete and an endurance and strength training coach. I do in-person training, and then majority of my clients are worldwide, and so I coach them remotely and build training plans. And I really specialize in athlete individuals. In the athlete world, it's called hybrid athletes. So it's kind of like your mixture between strength training, becoming as strong as possible, but then also incorporating in long distance running. And so that's what I do. I do it full time. I feel like I'm living a dream.
that's awesome. And we've actually sponsored a few of his, what's the word?
Projects.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, and we've actually sponsored a few of his projects. I think one of those was a run across the Pyrenees.
Yep. Was working. It was one of my unsuccessful attempts, let's say it that way. There's always successful and unsuccessful, and it was one of my unsuccessful attempts, but I was striving to run from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic across the Pyrenees, the HRP route. It's about 500 miles with an extreme amount of vert. And that didn't go so well, but I've done other projects here locally in Utah and around. I've done a project called the Utah Brawl. Brawl is the acronyms for Bear River and Wasatch Link Up. And that's where it ran from Bear Lake, Idaho, through the Bear River Range, and then down the Wasatch Front to Soldier Hollow. It's like about a 300-mile route. And some of the other ones I've done was like 2 iconic races, being the Wasatch 100 and the Tahoe 200, starting the same morning in 2 different states, running the Wasatch 100, catching a chartered flight directly upon finishing to California, and starting a 200-mile race about 36 hours behind the bulk of runners,
Right.
and finishing it in an allotted time frame.
I think that's an important note. I think when you say endurance athlete and distance runner, people think half marathons and marathons, but your kind of low end mileage of a race is like 100 miles, right? You're like 100 miles and up. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what got you into this in the first place? What I've always wondered, what drives someone to decide I'm going to go run for 100 miles, and not just run on easy terrain for 100 miles, but run on trail going up and down and across boulders and all of that.
I mean, it's a really rough terrain. And what's nice about that is it breaks up the running and you actually can hike. There's actually a point where hiking is more efficient long term than running. It's really interesting story. I mean, like, I didn't wake up. I haven't been a runner all my life. I've been into fitness in some way, some shape or form, but I've never been a runner until I was actually in my late 20s, early 30s. Late 20s, I started incorporating very short distance for incorporating cardio with my lifting and stuff like that. But it wasn't until like my early 30s that I started to push a little farther and a little farther. And in all honesty, I mean, I love running for the fact of the feeling that it gives me and the adventures. I prefer, obviously, off-road running, going over mountains. The last thing I want to do is sit on asphalt and run flat all day long. That would be like a poor scenario for me, not an ideal. And so, but the interesting thing for some of your listeners to see is like, at some point, there was a pivotal moment that opened up my eyes to, I really wonder what is possible. Like, what truly is, what am I truly capable of? And I remember running my first, like, 10K distance. It was just it was like a 5K to the gym and a 5K back. And I started doing that a little bit, and then one day I got like, I'm going to just go. I'm going to not do the workout today. I'm just going to run up to the gym and back, and so a straight 10K. And I remember finishing my first 10K, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, why do people do this? This is painful. Like, my heart rate's pounding out of my chest. I'm breathing hard, and my legs hurt. Everything hurts. My knees, my back. Like, what is the deal with this? And it wasn't until like, kind of like, it became more of a challenge. I was so bad at running. And it hurt so bad. There was some screw loose in my brain of some sort of just going, well, how can I get better at this? Like, how can I like eliminate some of these ailments that I'm feeling? And, obviously there's people out there running marathons and half marathons, which I had not even done in my early 30s. I'm 46 today. So we're talking about like 16 years ago, if you would have asked me, hey, or tell me, let's say this, tell me you're going to run 300 plus mile distances, I'd be like, you are crazy.
That's a long way to drive.
Like I couldn't even fathom it. I couldn't even like comprehend it or anything like that, especially after you run like a 5K and how bad it hurts. You're like, and I'm supposed to like times that by 100, and you're like, no way. But what happens is you start to figure out the 5K distance, and you start to work on the 10K distance, and you start to build yourself, work towards the half marathon, the marathon. And it's just like, and all you're doing is you're figuring out how to eliminate things that arise. So you're always going to run into issues.
Right.
If you go out too hard, you're going to blow up. So you got to feather your throttle on your pace, and then shoes to hydration to electrolytes to gear, like all these little things, these fine tunings. And as you practice consistently, your body transforms, your cardiovascular system transforms, your muscles transform, your ligaments, tendons, everything becomes, hey, this guy's going to keep doing this. We might as well evolve, like evolution, evolve into a more efficient, machine in a way. And then you're also applying lessons that you learned, and you run into a wall or you run into a situation, a challenge, and then you're like, how do I eliminate that challenge? How do I overcome that challenge? And so you just continue to problem solve over the years, and then all of a sudden you go a little farther, and then you're like, once you figure out that really there's no limit, it's just a solution. There's solutions. Like if I can remedy all the different solutions to challenges that I face, your potential becomes limitless. And so what am I, I'm talking to myself, or if you're talking to yourself, what are we capable of? And so that's all it is. It's like a math problem. It's like you just got to figure out the formula.
That's interesting. So it's that's applied to you in running, but I mean, it really sounds like you could apply that same philosophy to almost anything, like
business.
Instead of saying like I didn't succeed at something, you say what were those issues that caused me not to succeed, and how do I solve for those issues?
Exactly.
So you run the 10K. So from the time you run that 10K, like timeline wise, what does it look like before you do your first ultra, like your first official ultra run from your 10K to and from the gym?
Let's see. I'd have to say it's roughly four years max.
Okay.
I would have to say.
And what was the first one you ran?
So I had lived in Spokane, Washington, and there was there's a Mount Spokane 50K there. That's kind of like, I learned about ultras prior, and I was living there, and that's where I started to do a lot more running. Right. My son was a baby and an infant, and so I found a running stroller at a garage sale, purchased that, and every afternoon, I worked nights at the time, and so I would come home, and I would, on my way home from work, I'd hit the gym, like that was my thing, and then I'd get home and I'd go to sleep, and then I'd wake up. I'd want to spend time with my son, too, before I'd head back into work and stuff like that. And so at the time, I was just like, I need to get some more cardio, and I wanted to lose some more weight, summertime, swimsuit season, whatever. Right. And I was just like, throw him in the stroller and push him and run. And in Spokane, where we lived, it was pretty hilly. Yeah. And so it was like, as he got bigger, he became more resistance, and as I kept pushing him consistently, I got stronger, and that's where my running started. And then, just like you talked about a Ragnar, there is another race. It's called Spokane to Sandpoint or something like that. It's not as big of a race company. It's like a smaller race company, but it's up and I had some friends,
beautiful area too,
reach out and say, hey, you want to be on our team? And I'm like, okay. And that was my first running experience, was this team event. Right.
So there's some culture aspect to it as well.
And it opened my eyes. I was like, that was a lot of fun, and it opened my eyes to this. And so I wanted to do another one, but I wanted to be even better. Right. I saw some of the more speedy guys out there, and I got passed by some more speedy guys and girls. There's tons of speedy girls, holy cow. And it was just like I wonder if I could do, I want to see if I can get better, better. And so I started training more, and then I did a Ragnar and a couple Ragnars, and then it led into the very first trail Ragnar event in Zion. And I just got on their website and I put in a message to any team up on their board, like, hey, is anybody looking for an extra runner? And I got picked up and fell in love with trail way more than road. Right. I was like, this is my speed, This is, I grew up backpacking and stuff like that. My dad was in the military, and 4 boys, we were always out in the mountains. And so I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. Look at how far I traveled on my own 2 feet in this terrain. And that's what kind of lit the fire. Yeah. And then you start hanging out with people that have done bigger things than you. And I'm looking at them like, well, if they can run a 50K or a 50 miler or a 100 miler, well, why can't I? What cloth were they born from versus me? Like, what's the difference? And then if you start hanging around ultra running athletes at events, you're going to see all shapes, sizes, ages. I mean, 70-year-olds down to like teenagers. I mean, and it shows you that, I mean, we are our biggest limitation in life is what we perceive that what we're capable of. We put up the most amount of barriers on ourselves. We fence ourselves in to this, what we think our reality is or what our potential is. And if you can like push those barriers and step over that fence line and see that, that there's so much more out there and you're so much more capable. And it hurts sometimes, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. Like it's scary. You got to have that courage and stuff like that. But you just step over a little bit and then come back, and then you step over a little farther and then come back, and you just make those barriers kind of grow and grow and grow until you're like, look, there's no such thing as barriers. There's only such thing as figuring out how to accomplish whatever you create in your mind of a goal and working towards it. And I
think it's interesting. Something that really stood out as you were talking about that is you saw those when you ran that race. You saw those runners that were, faster than you. And I think at that point there's kind of two ways that we process that information as humans. The first one, I think a lot of us do. The first one is it's an intimidation. Wow, I can never be that. Or there must be something different, right? And your approach was very different. It was, well, they're no different than I am, and I want to be that.
Yeah, they bleed just like me.
Right.
How did they get to that point? And I know from experience within weightlifting, you don't just get under a certain weight and lift it. Right. I mean, there's some anatomy and some, structures, and some people have genetics different than other people. So you got that. But at the same time, there's still a level of work towards something. And if I want to lift that amount of weight, I need to progressively work towards it. And eventually, as I get stronger and push and I grow and develop, I'm going to be able to push that and possibly more. And so it's just like, am I willing to be patient enough to put in the work to actually achieve that? So it's basically like, how bad do I want it? And then you put your goal down, and you have to put aside the time. You have to make time. You have to structure your life around and take the time to work towards that goal. So even when you have a job and you got kids and a wife and stuff like that, you're like, okay, I don't want to take away from the family or anything like that. So there was a lot of times that in order to achieve that goal, I was waking up at 3 a.m, getting my run in, as best I could, and getting back. I needed to be back at the door at my house by like 6:50 so that I could grab my girls. They were old enough to where they could get themselves up, get themselves ready for school, put them in the car, drive them down to the bus stop, because we lived in a place where I had to drive down to the bus stop, get them off to school, come back up, get my son up, get him ready for school, take him to school, and then drive, an hour into work a day, work a full job, and then come back and do the whole evening thing, and then get to bed early so I can get back up at 3 a.m. to run again.
It's fascinating. It's just like the consistency of that philosophy. Again, it was, don't interpret that as that schedule is a reason why you can't do something. You said, here's a problem to solve. How do I solve it? Well, I get out of bed earlier and I do it earlier.
Yeah, and I did. I had at that time, and it's definitely, I'd say, if you're a listener's listening, obviously I know that in my 20s I could do less sleep. In my 30s I could do almost, but I just need a little bit more. In my 40s, I'm a little bit of a diva when it comes to sleep. And I also have figured out, like, within my ultra running, my performance, the more sleep I get, the better I perform.
Yeah.
So now sleep becomes part of my training.
Yeah.
And so I look ahead, like, so,
to the point where you drive around a place to sleep everywhere you go.
Well, what it is, it's kind of like, last night, so this morning before the podcast, There's a big mountain here that actually just shines a shadow right down on Clear's headquarters. And it's called Mount Timpanogos. It's the second highest mountain in the Wasatch Range right here in Utah. And it's a very popular summit to summit in the summertime. And I use it as a training ground for myself. And so I took a client of mine that I'm going to be helping with. And she's an exceptional a runner herself. And I took her and another friend on a 20-mile route up and around Temp and down and came into here. So to start that, I needed to start it at 4 a.m. so that I could be done in time to be here for the show. Wow. And so we did a 4 a.m. start. Well, that means a 2 a.m. alarm for me. Right. And so that means, you're working backwards. I need to be in bed like no later than 9:30, 10 to get about a 4.5 hours. And no, that's not ideal. I'm not telling everybody that's all you need. I will be making up some of that sleep this week, but that's the sacrifice, or I don't even want to say the sacrifice. That's the investment I made into my training and to myself to meet obligations. And then I'll shift things around to make up the sleep and to, training and everything.
With all of that, very much like coordinated and planned, do you still surprise yourself? Like, do you go out and you do a race or you do a run and you surprise yourself and go, wow, that was even better.
Easier or harder?
Or this is harder or better. I mean, just whatever, right? Because it sounds like you're very, very, you're very much a problem solver and you like to identify all the variables. You like to solve for the variables. And oftentimes when you identify and solve for the variables, you reduce the amount of kind of surprise, right? Yeah. Like, do you still get surprised?
I'll just tell you, if you finish a race and everything went perfect, you're probably wondering, I mean, this is just in the culture of ultra running, you're probably wondering if you didn't push hard enough. Okay. Because, seriously, ultra running is I'm signing up for an extreme amount of discomfort and a lot of problem solving and issues, trying to mitigate issues the entire time to finish this race. Right. And so pulling back causes its own problems because then you're out there longer, you're more exposed, but you're sometimes running with a lower heart rate, so that's actually a good thing. But there's some things that if you're going too slow, you're walking more, so now you got more friction in your feet. When you walk more, you actually are more receptive to blisters. Oh, interesting. That's why you see more of the back of the pack endurance runners have more issues with blisters and stuff like that than the front of the pack. The front of the pack don't deal with as many blisters usually because they're running and they're up on their forefront and they're striking properly. It's kind of an interesting, it's a trickle down. So if you're going to hike more, you're going to actually potentially have more compound issues. Plus you have to intake more food because you're out there longer in between checkpoints. Right. And
there's a calculation.
There's a calculation. And then pushing harder causes its own issues too. And so so if you get finished with the race and there was no issues and it felt like the stars completely aligned, it's kind of I'm in the twilight zone. This is not normal. Right. It's really weird. Interesting. And probably you're never going to have that experience again.
Still kind of, which is, I guess, still kind of the thrill of it too, right? Yeah. Is that there is that unknown that you can never solve for.
And people talk about that race that went perfect. And like I said, it's one of those ones I wonder if I could have pushed a little harder.
They call it the unicorn race?
The unicorn race. Yeah. Exactly that. There's so many different variables that you're working towards. And I think that's why people it's very addicting. The reason why it's very addicting, especially if you're a person that's always trying to level up and see how much better you can do. People keep coming back to races time and time again. I've ran this race 10 times. Why? You've seen it 10 times. Why are you paying to run something that you've already seen before? Well, what a lot of times is they've had a good race, they've had a bad race, and they don't know what it's going to be, and they just they want to see if they can do better. They just this ultimate internal drive to level up, to basically, I want to do better. I want to see what my potential is. I want to see what I can do this time by knowing all the turns, the climbs, the descents, the terrain, dialing in your hydration and your electrolytes and your food and calories and even when your body composition changes, so does your intake and output change. And that's a variable as well. And so you're like, I wonder what I could do this time. And so it's like this, like just wanting to do better and better and better.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, and that that actually, it's like it translate in different aspects of your life, within business, within relationships, within work, in the community. You're just trying to do better and better and better and better. And so, and it's this, and it just bleeds over into all aspects of your life, and you become more patient. And like sometimes my workouts are there's 90% of the time my workouts or my runs are the hardest thing I do all day. So when I get done with that, and I'm the one that actually chose to do that, I have control over that. All this other stuff that I don't have control over, like these different forces coming in at you from stresses, from, life and kids and work and everything like that. If your workout is the hardest thing, you're like,
I got this.
I can handle this.
I do get. I mean, I get kind of the. I've run 3 marathons. I was much younger. Well, I ran my first marathon when I was 18. I like to say it wasn't so much that it was 30 years ago. It was more like 60 pounds ago.
It's pretty impressive at 18 to get an 18-year-old to run a marathon. I mean, 18-year-olds want to do a lot other things rather than run a marathon.
And I did. I actually ran it much quicker than I thought I was going to. So I was the, I'd heard that like, oh, you want to run a marathon and the goal is to get under 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the hobbyist, And so, and I came across the finish line at 3:26. And so I was cooking. I think it was like just under an 8-minute mile average. And so I was pretty excited.
Let me ask you this. Did you think to yourself, I wonder if I could do under 3?
So, yes. Well, I like to say that there's this clarity as you're coming into the finish line. And the thought was, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
And then I call it finish line amnesia.
Oh, yeah.
Where you cross the finish line and the next thing you're thinking is, all right, where's the next one?
Yeah.
And could I go faster?
And
so I did. I signed up 6 months later for the Las Vegas Marathon. And my goal was to get right around 3 hours. And I was training. But the challenge was this, and maybe it's an excuse, but I didn't account for the variables. I was training, the marathon was in February at that time in Las Vegas. And I'm training in Utah.
In the winter.
Yeah. And I'm in college, and so I'm having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm out there in 20 degrees, running through the snow, putting my miles in, and then I go down there, and they decided not to start the race until the race didn't start till 7, so the sun was already up.
Is this the Mount Charleston?
No, this was the Las Vegas Marathon before they actually came into the Strip.
Okay.
So at the time they took you 11 miles out along I-15. There's that casino out there, Gold Nugget or something like that. And it was even worse. They've much improved this marathon. It's way better than it used to be. You would start and you would run 1.5 miles the wrong direction. And then you'd come around some cones and you run back 1.5 miles. And then at that point, you'd cross the starting line at 3 miles.
And then
you're running straight along I-15 on a frontage road that goes on a gradual uphill thing. And then you get to the 13th mile. And you can see the Strip off in the distance. And every step, that Strip looks like it's getting further and further away. And it was hot. Yeah. And I came out of the gate too fast. And I got to the 18th mile and completely 17th mile and completely bonked.
That's where it happens.
Completely bonked. So I stopped at a tent. And after I'd run the St. George one, I had a lot of buddies that are like, well, if Shad can do it, it can't be that hard. And so I had a whole bunch of friends from high school that signed up.
Yeah.
And 20 minutes pass, and they start coming by, and one of them hands me some ibuprofen, and he's like, "Get going again." And so I ran the rest, and I still finished at 3:45. And I'm like, I can't. I wonder if I had pushed. I couldn't have pushed. I was completely gassed when I did that, but I did finish.
Yeah.
But yeah. So and then I ran another one years later, and age and weight had caught up to me a little bit, but that was a fun one.
It happens to us.
But I had one experience with an ultra trail run, the Wasatch 100, which is a real kind of iconic one. I had a friend, she said, hey, I've got a friend, he's just running to finish, right? So I think 36 hours is the cutoff on that.
36 is the cutoff.
Yeah. And so he just wants to finish within the 36 hours. He needs a pacer and I was running a little, but I not good enough to be a pacer, not enough to be a pacer in my mind. And she's like, the section you need is just 7 miles. Can you do 7 miles? I was like, yeah, I can do 7 miles. And so she's driving me up to the point where I'm meeting the racer. And she goes, oh, by the way, we can't pick you up where we thought we could pick you up.
You're going to need to do
the full section. I was like, great. What is that? Like 10 miles?
Did you do Brighton? Because I know the race.
Yeah.
So did you start at Brighton?
I did Lambs Canyon to Brighton. So 22 miles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a prettiest section, but it's usually at night.
It was. I met him at 9 o'clock. I met him at 9 o'clock at night. And now I'm going from 7 miles in my mind to 22 miles. Yeah. And then I do a lot of mountain biking up there. And I can picture these distances. And I'm like, that is a long way. But I was like, we're just going to do it. He's basically wanting to finish, so he's not going quick. And so we went up and we dropped into Mill Creek. We stopped at the good station they had there, and we got him through. And we went up into Desolation. And I remember as we were pulling into the remote aid station at Desolation, everybody started cheering. And we're like, why is everybody cheering? And so we pull in and they're like, oh, the finisher just won. The finisher just crossed the finish line. Yeah. And he's still got 40 miles.
40 more miles.
And so we got into Brighton, and you know, the guy that was pacing from Brighton to, what was it, Big Wall or something like that? Or anyway, got in there, and I got in the car and we drove home, and I went to bed. And I slept for like 5 hours, and I woke up and I was like, that dude is still running. Like, I'm home, 5 hours of sleep. I'm going to go coach soccer, and he's still running. But he ended up finishing in 35 hours and 58 minutes. He was 2 minutes under the 36 hours, but he finished.
Was he DFL?
What's DFL?
Well, I can't say it on here. It's dead effing last.
I think he was. Yeah. I think he was the last.
DFL.
I think he was the last to finish under the 36.
Yeah.
So,
but he did. Some races give awards for that.
Yeah, do they?
Yeah.
So, but I do have to say, like, even though I only did the 22 miles, there was something about the interaction with the other runners on the trail. When we got to along the Wasatch Crest part, the part that goes along the ridge along the Wasatch Mountains before you drop into Brighton Ski Resort, we started picking up runners that didn't have pacers, that were really struggling.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm like, are you cool if, like, you know, these guys catch along, or do you want all my attention on you? He goes, no, let's. And so we had a band of us come in, and about 8 of us come in to Brighton at the same time. And it was a phenomenal event. And I was like, I'm hooked. And then I never did anything with it.
Like, tell me, because it's a very, very contagious sport.
It is.
And so you come in there and you're like, if he can do it
right
at that speed, like at this speed, I can do this at this speed, right? People don't realize that he had 50 plus miles on his legs in the heat, in the exposed, with huge climbs up from the valley floor to the Wasatch Range, and then across and traversed till he got to you, and now he's destroyed, and now that's his pace.
Like, yeah, exactly.
He's like, man, if he's I can do this pace forever.
But I had that amnesia again, though, where we're coming in the last 2 miles, and all I can think about is getting in that car, driving home, and going to bed. I'm like, this was crazy. And then the moment we got into Brighton and his pacer came in, I was kind of like, are you sure you want to pace him? I can take him the next session. Immediately, like, I'm like, let's go again.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to do something with that bug. I think every one of us, this is what happened to me. Like, as I started to run, that wasn't like all of a sudden like, oh, I'm going to run an ultra. Yeah. But it was like, I started to watch little things, and it was like, I wonder if I can do that. And that was like the poison, I guess, in my brain. It was just like, you would see somebody do something, and then I'm thinking all of us watch some documentary on some athlete or some, big effort of some sort.
Right.
And it was like, for me, I mean, I read a book from the ultramarathon man, Dean Karnazes, and it was all about just sharing his experiences and just telling the reader, you can do this. Anybody can do this, And you're just like, I'm going over here going, there's no way I can do that, when I'm reading this. And he's repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. And then one time I was watching a Red Bull documentary on Carl Meltzer. He's another local ultra runner.
He lives actually not too far from me.
Yeah, in Sandy.
Yeah.
And he was running the Pony Express Trail, the whole thing that they used to do back in the 1800s for the mail.
Yeah.
And he's running it to set a record across that on, somebody running. And Red Bull did a documentary on it. I'm just like, this guy's doing like 50 miles a day for how many weeks?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, incredible. In my mind, I'm just like, and it was like a little bit of, I wonder how he did that, and could I do that? But there's like, oh my gosh, that's like superhuman. And,
right.
And it wasn't until I started pushing and advancing that some of those bigger efforts started to open up, like, well, if I keep progressing like this, there's going to be a time that I'm going to reach that level. If you're always moving that bar, raising that bar, you're going to be up there. And before I knew it, that's what kind of like happened. I paced a friend. I mean, I went from a 50K, which is 31 miles, and then I paced a random stranger, basically, that we got connected through Facebook from mutual friends, and she was doing a 200-mile race in Tahoe, where I grew up out of Reno.
Yeah.
And I was familiar with the area. And when I showed up to pace her, there was no set pacing. Like your friend, you were like, I was going to do 7 miles. I could do that. And then all of a sudden they're springing 22 on you. At the time, I showed up. There were supposed to be multiple pacers. I was supposed to just kind of randomly take sections.
Right.
And I knew I was good for 30 because that was the longest distance I ran at the time. And then she's like, hey, like, how far have you ran in your life? Like, what's your longest distance? And how many hundreds have you ran? And I was like, I've only ran a 50K. And she about freaked out because I was the only pacer of all 5 of her pacers that showed up. Everybody, like, didn't show up. And I was the only one. And I was like, well, I'm good for 30, but she had 140 miles needing to be paced. And I had no expectations. All I did was focus on her. I made sure she's like, hey, when I went in there, she goes, I need you to do something for me. Because I was nervous. I was just like, oh my gosh, I think the first section was 20 miles. And I'm like, this is like 10 off of my longest. Yeah. She goes, all I need you to do is every 20 minutes tell me to eat. And every about 5 to 10 tell me to drink. And so all I did was watch my watch. And that was my job.
Right.
And then talk to her, and then when she tells me to shut up, shut up.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Do you think that having those kind of tasks created a distraction to what you were doing, like where it made it a little bit easier?
I was focused on her, not me.
Right.
So I wasn't focused. And plus, like you pacing your friend, we were going slow enough that I wasn't sitting there like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die up this hill.
Right.
Like I wasn't maxed out in my performance effort. Because she's already, when I picked her up, she had already 65 miles on her. And she's already fatigued to a point where now me coming in fresh, I stayed fresher longer because we basically were dialed back a little bit. I just focused in on doing, and then she goes, do me a favor, every time you tell me to eat, I want you to eat too. So there's really important tips within ultra running from experienced people telling newbies that sometimes you have to learn the hard way. I learned like some crucial lessons while serving her just by her telling me this. And so I started to eat and drink and do everything that she told me to do when I tell her to do it. And I realized, I blew through that 30-mile mark, blew through the 50-mile mark, and blew through the 75-mile mark. Before I knew it, I ran 93 miles with her.
As a pacer.
3 times farther than I've ever ran in my life. And if she would have asked me, or she would have told me, like your friend with you, told me that you're going to run 93 miles, I would have freaked out.
That would have been on your mind the whole time.
My walls would have been just stacked and closed in and saying, hell no. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. And so it was like, but I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know that, so I had no fear.
Sure.
I was just in the moment. And it said that that was a pivotal moment for me. The 2 weeks later, another friend asked me to pace him at the Bear 100 in Utah, and I ended up pacing him 50 miles. So all of a sudden, I went from 30 to 93, 2 weeks later, 50, and so all of a sudden, a week later, I signed up for my first official 50-miler and completed it. And I'm like, so these three things back to back, when I went, oh, I think I can do this. And all I could think about is I wanted that 200-mile race at Tahoe, where I grew up. I want to run entirely around that lake. That's all I wanted to do. Did
you do that? Had you done that before you did the back-to-back with the Wasatch 100?
This is my first, there's no way I would ever attempt the back-to-back.
All right.
So when I did the back-to-back with the Wasatch 100 and the Tahoe 200, I had already completed Tahoe 3 times.
Oh, got it.
So the next year after I paced her, I signed up. I was like, I'm going to do this. And for the next 3 years, I did those races and other races that gave me more and more experiences that then I started doing the math going, and I was actually doing really well. I was finishing Tahoe 200. There's a 105-hour time frame to finish it in. Like you were talking about with Wasatch 100 having 36. We had 105. And I was finishing with 30 plus hours remaining. And so then I was like, I wonder if I could run the Wasatch 100 in less than 30 hours and still be able to finish the Tahoe. I just got to get, it was just like, it was math. It was like, it was a problem. And I was like, I think I have solutions to the problem. Let's see if it'll work. It was just
That's amazing.
And so it's like, and if you can eliminate failure as something that so many people think that failing at something is an identity or a label that they put on themselves.
Right.
Like, I'm a failure. If you can look at it as a step in the process to success, because how many times do you go out and try to achieve something and don't the first time? It's like a baby walking. The baby doesn't give up after the first time it trips or falls down after holding onto the couch. It just keeps getting back up and trying until before you know it's running around the house causing havoc, getting into all the cupboards and everything like that. It's the same way. It's just you just got to figure out, if you fail at something, why?
Yeah.
And then, okay, here's what you believe that point of failure is. How do we remedy that?
What I love about this whole story is as I'm listening to this is the beginning is you're wondering if I can do this. And then you go in and you pace someone and your focus was on that person. And then that opened up another realm of, can I do this? And now you're kind of progressed into this new era of you're helping other people accomplish this. So talk a little bit about that. How long you been doing this coaching thing and what does that look like?
So when the 200 started up, the main 200s that people know about here in the U.S. from a company called Destination Trail, and now multiple race companies have started their own 200s. It's become kind of like a new, very popular distance. People are starting to level up to that distance, and it's even growing even past that. Now there's 250-mile races, 300-mile races. It's just like anything else. There's a progression.
Sure.
There's where's the limit? There's no limit. But as I got better and better, and basically, and I have we all have talents. We all have different talents in our lives, and one of my talents is I can see things. I can see a better way.
Right.
I can figure out and things, and so I've utilized. I'm not the fastest runner. Now I'm perfectly, and obviously my fitness is getting better and better every year. Even at 46, I'm still fitter, faster, stronger than I was last year or ever before. Right. So I don't know where the crest is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep riding this thing and keep progressing.
I have heard for distance runners, it is later in life than some other athletes and stuff.
Yeah, I know that. I know I don't recover as well or anything like that. There's things I'm having to incorporate more and more and more, especially in the nutrition and sleep and stuff like that. But I'm still progressing, and so that's very interesting. But as I'm getting better and better and better, I'm also, it's all, people hire business coaches.
Right.
people hire a personal trainer. Why? Because the personal trainer will help them reach their goals more efficiently. They don't have to go through as much of the trial by error. And even in the beginning stages of me, I asked a lot of people a lot of questions. And some of their answers helped me, and some of their answers actually didn't help me because they didn't work for me, because what works for that person doesn't work always for the other person. But over the years, I've learned what helps the mass majority and what helps like the minority. And to kind of like, and so when I became very dialed in, I'm very analytical, and I'm very type A with spreadsheets, numbers, everything like that, percentages, that then I found like a very overwhelming, useful tool with that in helping other people reach their goals. And so I started to help my friends that I have a friend, Mike McKnight. He's faster than me. And it's, you know, however it happened or whatever along the way, whether it's called genetics, whether they call hard work. I just, plain as day, he has a great talent.
Right.
And I know that my talent of organization, and he doesn't like to organize. He doesn't like to, he's very like
impulsive.
Just
go do the run.
And like put us together as a team, and we become like this magic power type thing.
Right.
That, I mean, I'm watching, you know, he's coming in an aid station and he's asking me, where am I at? How am I doing? Like, what's the numbers? Tell me like this. And I'm relaying everything, and if he slows down, I'm restructuring things. And if he's speeding up, I'm restructuring things. And together, like that type of thing, I can help him achieve even more. And so, and this is translated to other athletes. I've helped other athletes podium, to win races, and everything like that. And we come in, I analyze the event. I analyze the route. I know where we need to fuel, where we need to push harder, where we need to pull back, you know, like certain milestones and to set. Because when you're looking at an endurance race, I always say the race starts after the halfway.
Right.
Don't worry about anybody and what they're doing the first half of the race, because the race doesn't start till the halfway mark. Because somebody can easily be trained up and fast and speedy and all that stuff, but if they go out too hard and they burn into their adrenals and into their, you know, like their, depending on how much muscle fitness that they have, endurance, that second half of the race, if they implode, that second half of the race is going to be 2 times as long for them. And so, and they're not even going to be a factor. So the best way to do this is you're setting up the first half of your race for the second half of your race. Yeah. And that's where you're going to be successful. So by pulling back a percentage, what that percentage is going to differ for every person. And running your own race and not caring who's passing you and not letting your ego get the best of you. And if you stick to the plan, you create a plan, you have your end goal, you stick to the plan, you execute the plan, you have a 95% chance of meeting your goal or exceeding your goal. And if they are not as organized as you and they don't have the plan, you're probably 99% that you're going to beat those people because they're just running by feel. And if you're setting up and you're watching your heart rate, you're watching your effort, you're keeping on track of your electrolytes, your nutrition, everything, dialing it all in, you minimize the issues that'll affect you the second half of the race. And those second half of the race, those issues are compounded even more so. That's why I always refer back to the word endurance. Endurance is not like, I mean, there is speed involved, strength involved, and stuff like that. But it's the long haul, the endurance, the whole event. And so you're playing the long game. And this is a great contrast to life because a lot of people are playing the short game from financials to business to education. What's the quickest way to get what I want? Right. Instead of saying, what is the best, most efficient plan of attack to achieve the ultimate goal that I want? And being patient and not cutting corners in order to achieve it. And I think a lot of people in life tend to cut corners. And when you cut a corner, you cheat yourself.
You sacrifice something for the future.
Yeah, you're cheating yourself out of an experience within that
interesting.
particular area
Yeah.
that is going to give you like it's going to give you knowledge. It's going to give you understanding. I mean, if you skip over a challenge and bypass because that's too hard, I don't even want to attack it. Maybe I'll just cheat on the test if it's and copy somebody else or something like that, and not learn it, or have AI write my paper, or like whatever. You start doing that stuff. You start cutting those corners. You're cheating yourself out of knowledge and experience that you will never have. You won't have the opportunity to rely on.
Right.
And so now you're always relying on AI. You're always relying on copying papers. You're always relying, and you're finding it's like compounding in your professional life and everything like that. So by cutting corners, you're cheating yourself out of knowledge and experience. And in an ultra race, it's hard to finish a race if you're cutting corners in your training leading up to it. Because when you get to that starting line, you're as prepared as the time you invested into it. There's no like jumping in a car and speeding around and cutting a corner or something like that. You're gonna have to go through the storm. You're gonna have to weather it and everything like that. And if you're skipping runs in bad weather and your event happens to be in bad weather, the likelihood of you being successful and knowing what gear to utilize and how to utilize it and how to be ready to take on that bad weather is non-existent.
It is interesting. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking, human impulse is to kind of avoid hardship or avoid challenges. And you're saying like the best things in life come from leaning into those challenges and pushing yourself, because going through that challenge isn't going to be necessarily pleasant, but it sets you up for a very different, interaction with life, and you get a lot of things you don't get by avoiding those challenges.
And if you're familiar with Jocko,
Jocko.
Oh man, you need to look up Jocko. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, big motivational speaker and stuff like that.
Okay.
But he has this one really iconic message called good. And he's talking about things being negative towards him, and his answer is good. Oh, you get fired from a job? Good. You lose out of a relationship, or your car breaks down?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Basically, is if you can shift your mindset of that negative being a positive, it's so if challenges in your life, if you can switch your mindset as a challenge being a negative, I just get through this, instead of saying it's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Think of it as an opportunity, and it's so hard. I mean, it's just like ultra running. It's like
not natural.
You watch somebody like on TV, and they're like puking their guts out, or they quit a race with 9 miles to go out of 100 miles. And you're like, dude, you went 91 miles. You could have. Why didn't you just walk? You don't know what that person was feeling at not that last night. I guarantee you, he was pushing himself for the last 20,
and there is
that was his breaking point, and it was justified.
And
in
there
his
is
mind.
a point too where physiologically you can't go, regardless of how much you want to go. You're done.
Yeah, and so you watch things like that. Everybody, you watch stuff like challenges people are facing on social media, and they post it, and you're like, oh, that sucks for them, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But inside, you're like, I'm glad that that's not happened to me, or something like that, or it's different things, different aspects. If you can shift your mindset in your own personal life when you have a challenge that, okay, this is really hard. This is not ideal. I don't really enjoy in this. But if you can figure out a way to go, okay, there's a challenge here. There's an opportunity to work through the problem, to figure out how to overcome it, how to achieve, how to push through that barrier and get to the other side. You have that experience. Now that is in your toolbox of experiences that when it comes up again, it ain't going to be as bad.
And the trick is, instead of wallowing in it, you keep saying step back, and I like that. Instead of wallowing in it, you step back and you observe what you have control over, what you can do to affect the result that you want, and you solve the problem.
Exactly. I mean, that is super. That's all about like being present.
Right.
Being present and not being quick to react, but actually slow to respond in a proper way, an effective way.
Oh, that's great. So looking more specifically at some of the mechanics, and some of the mechanics we're very interested in with the products we make. Talk to us a little bit about like breathing and the impact of breathing on an ultra marathoner, and then as you're talking to your clients, like what is the advice that you give to them on breathing?
Well, let me give your clients, or let's say your listeners, an understanding. So, yes, some of my projects has been sponsored by Clear. It wasn't Clear that reached out to me. It was me reaching out to Clear. And the reason why I reached out to Clear is because when we met, you gave me product, and unknowingly, I used those products, and I noticed differences in performance. I was at a point where I was very understanding of where my physiology, some of these setbacks that I've had and conditions that I have that actually got remedied with your product. And so then I came to you and said, hey, I've been using your product. I've been doing this. Like, I'm using your product all the time. Would you be interested in collaborating on a project? You know, kind of a thing. And so the breathing part of it is one of the biggest parts. So I have a condition that's hereditary. My dad has it. My brothers have it and stuff like that. And we get a little bit more phlegm.
Okay.
Like in the morning, I get more phlegm. I don't know what it is. My grandma had it. My dad has it and stuff. And so when I run in the morning, I'm like hacking out stuff, right? Once I started using the Clear nasal spray, you know, I'm just listening to you in your tent while I was in the KT tent, and you're basically telling these, you know, different people taking free samples, and I'm listening to how to use it. And so when you gave me free samples, I took it, and so I would start using the Clear in my nose. I like to get up and take a shower. It's like kind of like this wake up thing for me. But I'd put it in my nose, and it would just flush my sinuses every morning. And then when I'd get out on my run, and in fact, it would go down the nasal, and it would break up wherever the phlegm was building up, and it would just be out, and then I was breathing better. So if you can breathe through your nose, because the airway through your nose, your nostrils, especially the out breathing, you oxygenate your blood better from your lungs to your blood system. Because if you breathe out your mouth has a wider hole, and there's not any back pressure.
Right.
So your nose, when you, it takes longer to exhale that.
Right.
One of the other things you're doing, you're controlling your heart rate. Your heart rate's coming down, and you're oxygenating your blood better because that back compression into your lungs, into your bloodstream, oxygenates the legs better. So your legs will flush the lactic acid better. They'll feel more relaxed. Your heart rate won't have to beat as heavy to get the blood to all the extremities, because the oxygen volume in your blood is going to be a higher concentration by breathing through your nose. A lot of running athletes will tape their mouth shut and do drills where they run really, really slow, and they keep breathing through their nose, and they slowly build up a faster pace, and their body learns that it can actually run at a faster pace while breathing through their nose. Same with swimmers. That's one great thing about swimmers. Swimmers can't breathe as frequently as a runner because their head's in the water and it comes to the side. It comes in, so their body becomes more efficient at oxygenating their blood. And oxygenating your blood has a overall result from the brain to the heart to the lungs to the muscles, everything.
I think you said something important there is that you can't just tape your lips and expect to get those increases inside.
I can't tape my lips anyways because of this.
Yeah, but if you're used to running, if you run, and I've tried it myself, and
it's hard.
I know all the science, and I still have a hard time just breathing through my nose. I do a lot of mountain biking, and I'll consciously think about it, and then I'll stop thinking about it, and I realize I'm breathing through my mouth, and I think that's why people actually physically put it there, because it takes something to do that. But when I started doing it, I got way worse before I started getting better, because your body reacts differently to it.
Oh, it's stressed.
Yeah, it's stressed.
Like,
you feel like you're not
suffocating.
Yeah.
So I always say, tape your mouth, go for a walk. Just walk first. Long
Yeah.
deep breaths, in and out, and then go for a very light jog, and then go back to a walk, very light jog, and then work to where you could just jog stuff. If you can't tape your mouth like me, what I do is I just close my mouth.
Yeah.
And if you want to take it on a beginning level, is breathe in your mouth, breathe out your nose.
And all of this is easier when it's open.
Yeah.
Right?
And so you can do this, and that alone, when I crest a hill, like when you're getting in, and a lot of times people will continue to walk and walk and walk until their heart rate comes down. I've learned that right before I'm about to crest a hill, I'll go down to and I'll just start breathing through my nose as I'm cresting the hill. And I'm trying, and once it starts to oxygenate my bloods, all of a sudden, like, my heart rate starts to come down, and I can take off as I'm cresting the hill. So I've practiced this enough times that I'm like, okay, I'm about to crest this hill, and I'll do that, and I'll actually make it more of an effort and stuff like that. A product, I'm just going to tell you right now, here on this, like, Clear needs, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You need to do nasal strips.
Nasal strips?
I'm telling you, it goes right in line with everything that you guys do.
Oh, just open that airway.
That's the next level for me,
Yeah.
is taking nasal strips on my nose and opening up the airway even that much more. I'm just telling you, you guys need to start
it's
doing
gonna be
Clear
interesting.
nasal strips.
I'm going to be watching the Paris Olympics this year and watching the runners and stuff and see how many of them are breathing through their nose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's fascinating, because I think people naturally want to breathe through their mouth because they feel like they're not able to get air, and it's just like, but that whole back pressure, right? Creating that
Watch
back
the front
pressure
half
and
of
pushing
any marathon. Some of them will have their mouth just barely open,
Yeah.
but they're still breathing through their
Breathing through
nose. Like those guys in the
fascinating.
fast, they're like, it's nose
Yeah.
breathing like crazy.
So another question: you're out for 36 hours. I mean, you're doing nutrition on a 100-mile run. The small runs for you now. I mean, some of these runs, like, you're out for multiple days and stuff. What are you doing for things like your teeth while you're running?
It's a huge deal. So one of the things, so this is another thing, when we started having more of a relationship, you started giving us some Spry gum, and you started giving us toothpaste. And the interesting thing is, on a 200-mile race, you have 4 days to complete it, that 105 hours. You got about 4 days plus to... Even us in the front, finishing it in the 50 to 70-hour range, depending on the terrain and everything. Every race is a little different. But up in the front, you still have that same thing. You're still doing a level of mouth breathing. And you don't have every runner out there, we're always breathing through our nose. One, in dry conditions, breathing through your nose causes usually nosebleeds. I've been in Tahoe 200 before, sitting at a stream, just pouring blood down, just because it got dry in my capillaries and stuff like that. That was pre-Clear. Now I can't even remember the last time I've gotten a nosebleed. I just use the product every day and stuff like that. Another thing is when you're breathing through your mouth constantly, and you're eating goos and all the different quick carbs, along with whole food that we're eating in these 200-mile races, sugary. Yeah. And it actually, you build up this slime on your teeth. Like, you feel it. Like, every ultra runner that listens to this podcast is just like, oh my gosh, he's exactly right. And it gets to the point, it gets so bad that some runners will carry, just like through hikers, backpackers, they'll take a toothbrush, they'll cut it down so it's nice and weight, or they'll put disposable toothbrushes in their drop bags at the checkpoints, so they can come in and brush their teeth because it's so nasty. And I can't even imagine what my breath smells like if my teeth are that slimed with bacteria or whatever that film is that builds up, and then all the different foods and the goos and the sugars and jerky, whatever you're eating. So one of the things that we figured out, I mean, it was Nate that actually just said, hey, you guys need to be using this gum and this toothpaste. And so we started using the toothpaste, but it was actually the gum was the most convenient. Sure. Because we're in the front. We're like, I'm not have time to brush my teeth. I'm not taking the time to brush my teeth. We would just we'll pop gum, and it cleans it cleans all that off. Yeah. While we're running. Right. So we're running, we're freshening our breath, and you know, I mean, I don't know if this is bad, but we just spit it out, and
Yeah.
you just have like, I have a little supply of gum, and every like 20 miles,
Yeah.
I'll pop
And
just
your
a
mouth
gum
feels
in,
totally clean after.
and it's totally clean. It feels very more comfortable and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, 'cause
and then
that- I
I'm
mean,
not
that-
afraid of talking to the aid station workers
Yeah.
going, I mean,
all that
I
stuff-
stink already, but
Yeah.
a breath adding that to it is just a
Right.
triple factor, you know?
Yeah, because all that stuff building up on your teeth is the bacteria that's consuming all those carbs, and then with all that running and breathing, you're producing less saliva. You have less saliva in your mouth, and so yeah, that bacteria just builds up on your gum and your teeth, and it's the xylitol in the gum that just breaks that bacteria down and allows for your teeth to feel clean. So,
And the next thing is when me and Mike, my buddy Mike, were running across Arizona on the Arizona Trail. That's when you guys, I don't know if you had it before, but you introduced the mouth spray.
oh yeah,
It was like a moisture mouth
Yep.
spray to us.
Yeah.
Because we were running across Arizona, and Nate's like, dude, you need to take this and use
Yeah.
it. It made it such a big deal. So one of the other things that happens to a runner, we'll take like drink mixes.
Yeah.
And we'll take electrolytes, and you're taking all this stuff, and you start to get a sore throat. It's just breathing through your mouth. There's just so much going
Right.
on that a lot of people will get sore throats from the different, just the different powders and stuff like that you're always consuming and stuff like that. And then if you add acidic things to it, like pineapple or oranges and stuff like that, some people do juices.
Yeah.
It's a bad remedy. And after a while, you start to get this sore throat. Well, we noticed on the AZT that just shooting that in your mouth every once in a while actually alleviated the sore throat so that we can keep
Interesting.
taking all this stuff in without getting the sore throat. So I don't know exactly what's causing the sore throat besides maybe like heavy breathing
Right.
and dryness and just everything else that might be causing it. And it definitely happens past, like, we don't usually get the sore throat in shorter distances like 200
Right.
normally. But when we were going up to like the 800-mile distance, you're doing that for over 10 days, you notice that kind of thing. And so just spraying that in my mouth became a bit, and you have those little shots
Yep.
that fit in our pack.
Easy
and
to
so
squirt.
Here we are
Yeah.
with all this oral care, nasal spray. You got the little nasal spray things. And so I have like a little pack right here, and it's my little toiletry bag, and I got my like gum, my nasal spray. It's like my clear
Awesome. It's your
pocket.
kit.
It's my clear pocket. It makes you're so uncomfortable doing these distances. It alleviates some of that discomfort.
It's one of those other little problems you solve for, right?
Yeah.
You talk about
Yeah.
finding all the problems and solving for the
Yeah,
problems.
if you can be as comfortable as possible, because those things compound.
Sure.
I mean, just even a little rock or a little blister in your foot, like, is times 10.
Right.
When you're out in the heat, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're calorie deficient. It's just like, it's the breaking point. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back. And you can alleviate the nasal, you can alleviate the mouth stuff, and it makes life so much better.
That's amazing.
So,
Any projects you're working on right now?
well, yeah, I mean, I got some pretty big ones in the works that just probably too, even talking about it on this is a little too premature.
Yeah.
Let's say that, because there's other people involved that I'm going to challenge head-to-head race.
Okay.
Pretty influential people in the running community. And this probably, I have to be very temperamental about how I call them out.
Okay.
Where it's not not a negative thing, but I do plan on going back to Arizona and running it again.
Great. And we'll definitely have you back to talk about some of those projects that you're working on. If people that are listening to this are interested in learning more about doing ultras, and do you have a resource that they can look out to?
So my website is currently, it's about 50% done, but it's still active in there. It's adventureyourpotential.com. But Adventure Your Potential on Instagram is probably the best way. Facebook, you can do Ben Light.
And I know that you do, and not beyond just the people that are interested in doing a run, you work with companies and groups for speaking and doing that, because a lot of the stuff you've learned in ultra, you've illustrated on this program that
Oh, yeah.
those same things connect with our regular life. So
Yeah, so I do motivational speaking for companies, and then obviously private coaching if you're in the area and you want personal training and stuff like that. I will say that a lot of my clients for coaching, I'm not only a running coach, but obviously a strength training coach. So a lot of my clients like the gym. Let's say it that way.
Yeah.
Or utilize the gym. I'm good about marrying that strength training. Either you have a home gym or home equipment, or you go to a big gym facility or something like that. I take whatever you have available, create a workout plan based on your goals in mind. And I have a handful of males and females that just want to get in shape too. I have a couple right now that are going to do a 10-day backpacking trip in the Dolomites.
Okay.
So they just want to be prepared to be successful at this and be, feel better while they're up at altitude and working towards that. I have a lot of clients within the military that are trying to get into whether they're going into selections, want to be prepared for selections, which is special forces, people that are doing Spartans or OCR, obstacle course racing, and then ultras. So if an individual loves the gym and wants to be in the best shape of their life, the most fit, not just lift weights, but actually look the part as well, that's my forte.
That's great.
So
Ben, it's been great having you. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me.
And I would encourage everybody to check out Ben's Instagram page. There are some amazing pictures that kind of put into context these things that we've talked about. So,
yes.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
This episode was hosted by Shad Slaughter with our special guest, Ben Light. Produced by David Monk. Associate producer, Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby. Research by Sabre Bills. Graphics by Joseph Thornton. Music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend or on social media. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.